Hey everyone, welcome back to JLXP. This is coming to you right after EG has eliminated Team Liquid from Chicago, from Worlds, and effectively ended their year. It is the end of one of the almost longest feeling LCS weekends I've ever experienced. Every single loser's bracket game, actually for the entire playoffs, has gone to a game 5. The only series that haven't gone to 5 games have been upper bracket battles. And where we stand now, it is Cloud9 sitting in finals, and then the winner of 100 Thieves, EG, will face them there. That in itself wouldn't have been like the most shocking thing if you just went into a cave for 3 weeks and came out and saw that this is what would happen. But I think the way we got here was really strange. And I've been going over in my head kind of how I want to break down this episode, and I'm still not entirely sure. But I think the first thing that I will talk about is how, like, weirdly not hype I was after the EGTL series. I think it was because both of these teams at times during the year had shown so much promise or talent or potential, but we ended with this really, really peculiar series. Like, Team Liquid had seemingly exhausted all of their options. They were backs full against the wall in the CLG series, and then just made this reach for Hansama Jinx because nothing else was working. And it just managed to kind of snatch victory from the jaws of defeat in the CLG series. And then they had 3 days to consider how that happened heading into this EG series, and they just kind of kept running back that same play like that was the only thing they had left. And I think to EG's credit, they did find ways to pick team compositions that would make it really, really hard for Jinx to play the game eventually. Like specifically Game 4, the Misfortune Gangplank with Trundle. Like, considering Hansama didn't have a Lulu in that game, literally, if just Misfortune presses E and Gangplank presses R, it's like 100% of Jinx's health. So that game was super unplayable for Hansama and was part of the comeback. But I think I want to go back a little bit for Team Liquid in particular, because they are the ones that we won't be talking about likely past this episode until next year. And maybe give some initial thoughts on what their journey was and why maybe it went wrong. Because they did look very good, 8.5 months ago in lock-in when they won. That was maybe the peak. And for the next 8.5 months, they showed no improvement, which is always tough to see. And I think part of it is that when you take 5 veterans, there's a certain level of malleability with each player. And I think here's the weird thing about the 5 players on Team Liquid. I think all of them had really good games and some bad games. But by and large, I don't feel like the individuals on that team massively underperformed or aren't top players or will never be top players again. I just feel like as much as they tried so many different permutations to make it work with the way they approached draft or tried in-game strategy or tried to put Bwipo on tank duty or tried to play around Hansama or tried to play heavy mid-jungle with Centaur and Bjergsen or tried to play early game or tried to play scaling. Like, as so many different things they tried throughout the year, none of them quite fit right. And that is something that they're going to have to consider when they're building their next roster. And I say that kind of regretfully because even though when I look at the global contract database, Core JJ is the only one that would be up in free agency at the end of 22, I just cannot see the level of investment that they made being justified for another year when they finish fourth, when they don't make Worlds in North America, the thing that they were trying so hard to do. So because I knew that like the failure for either EG or TL would mean so much, I wasn't necessarily happy that one of them failed, if that makes sense. So it's been a bit of a strange night with my thoughts. But to continue on the TL point, like I think you can look at some of the teams that have been best with Bwipo. It was some of those old Fnatic teams. Those were constructed much differently than this current Team Liquid team. And Bjergsen, kind of depending on the day of the Reddit thread, would have people saying how like he's just built different or he's playing incredible. And he had a couple Talia games where he just absolutely carried today against EG. But then he has the Akali game, he has the Galio game where he looks useless. And the teams where Bjergsen has been the most successful, when it works poorly, it's called Bjergsen and 4 wards. But I think part of that is because he's a very controlling player. Like he wants the game to be played a specific way so he can do things on his timings and the team can follow. But then you also have Core JJ, who I think will, if he finds a different team or if Team Liquid decides to rebuild around him, I think would excel with a team that is very, very good at following Core JJ. And that is not the Core JJ that we saw at the end of the year where he was playing Lulu and Yuumi and really just trying to support the rest of the team rather than being that guy who is just showing up everywhere. Whenever a team finds kind of the highest level of temporary success, it's because they're able to settle on that one thing, like the Hail Mary play. I would say, actually, last year, Team Liquid, to take it a step back, after I left and Alfari came back, it looked to me like that team all in on top lane. Like, they got exceptionally good at turret diving on the correct waves, sometimes between 2.5 to 4 minutes, and then playing a very effective side lane game. Core JJ just abandoned bot lane. Tactical was playing stuff like Ziggs, and that got them to Worlds. And I think they tried a similar thing this year, actually, except the thing was, let's just hyper carry Hans Sama and build teamfight comps, and it wasn't quite enough. So that's where I'll pin Team Liquid for now. I have more thoughts, but they're just not organized enough to make a compelling podcast at the moment. So I'll come back to them for sure at some point in a future episode. I want to talk about EG, though, because I am very confused by what I saw the whole week, even dating back to the C9 series, but more so this week. The TSM series, the TL series today, that was a completely different team than I watched for almost all of 2022. They just had a different style of play. They had a different energy about them. I think something is definitely off with that team, and I don't know what it is. Just looking at the way that they drafted, like, I think even just looking at the way Impact drafted is the craziest thing. Like, he was so good at Ornn, at even like a top lane Sejuani, at like a tank Gragas, because they could always play around that, because then JoJo and Danny would be these teamfight threats. They were unwilling to not have Impact on a carry because trust had been bounced around and lost, and it looked to me from the outside like the team did not have the willingness to play around Danny the way that they did the entire year. I don't know why that is. I don't want to speculate heavily on why that is, but it was decidedly different, and I don't know if they can get that back in time for the next week. I really hope they can get that back in time for Worlds, but it makes me heavily favor, at the moment, 100 Thieves to get back to the finals in their rematch against Cloud9. Talk about Cloud9 briefly. And I gave them a bunch of praise last week after they beat EG, and I think this week was just a continuation of that, but I wanted to talk about one player in particular, and that's Jensen. And he played at a really, really high level in this series. He definitely bested Abadaga, and he was a big reason that the team won. I think the other high performers that I'd praised last week, and Berserker and Sven making the role swap and Fudge having huge champion diversity and Blabber, all those things were true. But I didn't focus that much on Jensen. And there's kind of a weird thought I had. where if the system was somehow, if it was somehow acceptable for an experienced player like Jensen to not play spring and then play summer, it's actually ideal for some players. This was the case with Doublelift back in 2017 with TSM, where he took off spring. But it just creates these super weird politics because you're never going to then be in a comfortable place with your spring split roster and then have this guy just kind of cruise in, having not done all the work that everyone did in spring, and have it be okay. But like look at what C9 has essentially done. They have become the best team in the LCS, if we kind of math this out, in like 2 months. Everyone else has had like 8 months to build. Team Liquid has had the same roster for 8 months. Team Liquid did not get better in 8 months. C9 did get better in 2 months. They showed more improvement in 2 months than Team Liquid showed in 8. And it's weird, man. It definitely makes me reconsider, and this is like a bigger thought, but it makes me reconsider the way people value practice and what skills you feel like you need to work on in order to become a top team. Like, this is also something that could possibly be like a whole different podcast, and it's a very half-baked idea, but teams spend so much of their mental energy in scrims almost every day. So the general schedule is like Monday's an off day. That's like a skills development day, but honestly, it needs to be an off day, but it never is because that's the only day you can devote to solo queue. Then your other days are scrims Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 5 to 6 hours because it's a best of 5. It's not a best of 5, it's just 5 games. You're doing meetings before, you're doing meetings after, you're talking about all these theories, you're doing all this development stuff with the team. Sometimes you're doing, physical exercises. It's just all this stuff. And then on the weekends, obviously, you're going to the studio, you're playing your stage matches, you're doing draft prep, you're doing draft meetings, you're doing recaps. You have such little time to, like, let's say, grow your champion pool or just play solo queue or just do, like, different stuff. Like, and every region is like this. It's not just NA. Like, people say, like, NA scrims possibly less than some teams in LPL or LCK. But, like, I just do kind of wonder if it's too much grinding of the same learning style. Because I think Jensen is actually better now than he would have been if he played in the LCS in spring. Because his ability to unplug in spring, chill when he wanted to, grind champs queue when he wanted to, and then have this 2-month burst of high focus where he's then relearning the big things of being on a top team. There's certain things that are just better about that. And to even maybe use Team Liquid as an example, like, why were they best when they first joined up with each other? This isn't meant to be a shot at Team Liquid. This is literally meant to be like an open question of what ingredients did these guys have? Like, what training were they doing before they started playing together on Team Liquid that they stopped doing? What muscle did they stop working out because the scrim environment and the stage environment is the way it is that made it so they could not improve? It's worth thinking about. I'm not entirely sure. It's an active thought. But it's something that C9 has benefited from, I think. And it's why they're in the winners bracket final. Really quick, TSM CLG. I want to credit those orgs, especially CLG. If you would have told me at the start of the year that they would be up 2-0 against Team Liquid, I would have never freaking believed you. No way. But they were. They did blow the series at the end. We saw the EGTL series today, but we were so close to seeing a TSM COG series. That is absolutely crazy. That's how close this weekend actually was. There were certain moments in LoL Esports history that are actually this close, but you end up only remembering the results because these like clutch moments happen or the sweeps don't complete. But I think it's important to acknowledge when they are very, very close, like what it could have meant. It would have been absolute bedlam if CLG and TSM were playing today instead of Team Liquid versus EG. And we were actually very close to that. It's just one of those things that blows my mind. That is currently, I want to talk about 100 Thieves. Sorry. I need to talk about 100 Thieves. I'm not just going to leave them completely dry. I liked Sunday's tweet after their series. And I liked Abadaga's post-game interview. He took a lot of personal responsibility for losing the series to C9. And one thing that limited them in that series, actually, was that they were permabanning Sejuani because C9 could use it as a Sejuani flex. And Fudge criticized Sunday's champion pool afterwards. But literally his apology tweet was a screenshot of him playing, and he was playing Sejuani. This is Sunday. So they're going to use this week in full, I think, to try and broaden their champion pools and be better prepared for Cloud9 next time. And I still have a lot of faith in this team. I really admire the way they've handled themselves this year, shrugging off criticism of people calling them boring or me saying they're not motivated or that they're coasting. They're going to make it. They're definitely going to Worlds. They're going to have gas left for that. And they very well still could win the split. 3 of the 4 splits since the loser bracket has been introduced have been won by a team from the lower bracket. So it's nice emotionally. You saw how excited Cloud9 was to be in the final and also be guaranteed group stage because there's no way they can be third, so they won't have to go and play in stage at Worlds. That's exciting in itself. But to actually win the split hasn't helped other teams that much. So that'll be the final thought I leave this episode with. I might try and do multiple episodes throughout this next week, so please stay tuned. Sorry for the short episode tonight. It's just been such a crazy week, and I don't want to belabor points if I don't have anything compelling to add to the conversation. So when I do have compelling things to add to the conversation, you will hear from me. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you next time.